The Loretta Young Show.
Hello. An issue came up during our last election that had nothing to do with the platforms on which the candidates ran. But it was so bizarre and far-reaching in its implications that every newspaper in the country picked up the story. And that's the inspiration for our story tonight. And now for our story about the most unusual election campaign of any season. We're going to let you supply the name of the city, but we're going to supply the name of the candidates.
And I say to you, my friends, that prosperity proves under a green thumb. So re-elect Mayor Green, a man experienced in that exalted high office to which he was elected.
What I thought was maybe you could think up a good caption. This city has been milked white by green or something like that.
It's good, Joe. It's a good thought. But now here's the thing. You shouldn't have had a man milking a cow. It should be a machine, a milking machine. That's what we've got to get across to the people. We've got to make the voters realize that a political machine is milking this city dry. The machine aids, Joe.
Uh-huh. I'll tell you, Blanche, I have never been so furious in my whole life. 2 hours we sat in that man's office waiting. Well, that's right, the whole committee. But the same old story all over again. You know, you'd think that a man who was running for re-election would at least be willing to... Mr. Honey, can you hear me? No, but it's that crazy sound truck going by again. Wait a minute, I'll close the window. Maybe that'll help. Wait a minute now.
Are you tired of the way your city's being run? You have a complaint. Then Blodgett with Blodgett. Elect Perry Blodget mayor.
Honey, somebody's at the door. Can I call you back? Yeah, in a few minutes. Okay. Bye. Yes?
We're looking for Mrs. Blodgett, Mrs. Penny Blodgett.
I'm Mrs. Blodgett.
Mrs. Blodgett, we're from the Independent Voters for Progress League.
Oh?
I'm Jim Morton. This is Penny.
How do you do?
We come here to talk to you about being a candidate for mayor.
I'm sorry. I'm afraid you've made a mistake. I'm Mrs. Penny Blodgett. That's not Mrs. Perry Blodget. I am not related to the man who's running for mayor.
We know you're not related to him. That's why we want to talk to you. Can we come in?
Oh, yeah, surely. But look here, I've already told you, this is all a silly mistake, you know.
Why don't you sit down, Mrs. Blodgett? Let me do the explaining.
Very well.
The Independent Voters for Progress have decided they'd like to have you be their candidate for mayor. So they sent us down here to talk about it.
They've what? Oh, you can't be serious.
We'll provide the petition, all the names that you can file, pay the filing fees. And we're prepared to make a $2,000 cash contribution to your campaign fund.
But look, I don't understand. Why me? I've never had anything to do with... Oh, wait a minute. You mean because I'm the chairman of the PTA committee? I mean because of what we tried to do about the parks and the playgrounds for our children in this city. No?
Let's just say we have our reasons.
Now, about this $2,000, you understand, Mrs. Blodgett, that you keep your own books. You can buy radio or TV time or newspaper ads, or you can spend it for something else. That's up to you. We don't ask any questions. See what I mean?
But you don't know me. You don't know anything about me.
On the contrary, we know quite a bit about you, Mrs. Blodgett. We know that your husband died 2 years ago, leaving you with a lot of unpaid doctor bills and a small son to raise. We know that you lost your job with Croton and Whiting when they went into bankruptcy, and you still haven't collected your last 2 months' pay. We know the taxes on your home are delinquent, first and second installments. And we also know that $2,000 would save your home, but you catch up on a few other things and maybe leave you a few dollars in the bank.
How did you find out all these things?
It's our business to find out things.
think I do see. Now, you correct me if I'm wrong. You just picked my name out of a telephone book because it looks like Perry Blodget's name. That ought to confuse the voters, but good.
But Mrs. Blodgett...
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I'm going to ask you to leave.
Just a minute. There's really nothing to get upset about. There's nothing illegal about running for office or asking someone else to run.
But it's a deliberate fraud. A transparent scheme to fool the voters. You've come here and offered me a $2,000 bribe.
Just a minute. Now, we offered to make a contribution to your campaign fund. Now, there's nothing illegal about that. We distinctly told you what it was, and you can't say otherwise.
We came here with a perfectly legitimate proposition. If you don't cotton to the idea, that's your privilege. There are more fish in the sea, and there are more Blodgetts in the telephone book.
In other words, if I don't accept your proposition, you'll find another Blodgett who will?
You express it very concisely. We won't take up any more of your time. I assume you're not interested.
Well, now, I'm not quite sure. Supposing I did accept your offer, how many strings would be attached to it?
No strings, Mrs. Blodgett.
Oh?
You just agree to file, that's all.
And agree not to withdraw your name after you get the money. You've got to promise that.
Yes. But, well, I mean, just supposing I did get elected, what then?
In that case, there'll be no strings.
All right. I'll give you a statement to take back to your committee. You may tell them that I choose to run.
Thank you, Mrs. Blodgett.
There's absolutely no truth in that at all.
Then you deny that you're working hand in glove with Mayor Green.
Oh, emphatically I do.
May I ask, when was the last time you talked to the mayor?
I've never talked to the mayor. I've never even met him. I might add, however, that 11 times in the last 3 years our committee has called on Mayor Green to protest the flagrant neglect of establishing the proper parks and playgrounds for our children in this city, and 11 times he broke his appointments with us.
Now, Mrs. Blodgett, we were none of us born yesterday. Won't you admit that the voters will be confused by the similarity in names?
Mr. Murphy, I cut out a little item here of your newspaper yesterday afternoon. It's from the social column. May I read it to you, please? Mrs. Cyrus Wetherington entertained the ladies of the East Side Women's Club at her home, while Mr. Cyrus Wetherington is touring Europe.
So what? What's wrong with that?
Well, aren't you afraid that your readers will be confused by the similarity of names? I mean, might they not think that Mr. Wetherington was entertaining the ladies at home while Mrs. Wetherington was touring Europe? Oh.
Now, Mrs. Blodgett, that's altogether different.
Well, I don't know. The people who vote are the same people who read newspapers. And, you know, I think it's an insult to their intelligence to say that they cannot distinguish between two names on a ballot, Perry Blodget or Mrs. Penny Blodgett. Don't you? Yes, what is it?
I'd like to speak to Mrs. Penny Blodgett, please.
Well, what about? It's awfully late.
I'm Perry Blodgett. What I have to say won't take long, but it's very important.
Yes, of course. Just a minute. Come in.
Thank you.
Well,
You're Penny Blodgett?
yes.
Well, this afternoon, at the very last minute, just before the filings closed, you entered your name as a candidate for mayor.
Well, now, you didn't have to make a special trip out here to tell me that. Sit down, won't you, please?
Well, I'm asking you to withdraw your name
Oh. Why, may I ask?
because I'm prepared to go into court and get an injunction. Keep your name off the ballot. However, I think it would be better if you withdrew voluntarily.
Better for whom?
Better for you, frankly.
Oh.
There's going to be a bad stench if I have to go into court. It might even result in a criminal information being filed.
Are you implying it's a crime for an ordinary citizen to run for office?
Fraud is a crime, Mrs. Blodgett. So is the intent to defraud. Look, I understand you have a small son. I was thinking of him. It's going to be pretty rough on him to have your name dragged through the mud.
Suppose we just leave my son out of this, shall we?
All right. You accept the responsibility then.
Very well.
But let me say this. I don't make a habit of fighting women or hurting children. I'd prefer not to. But please understand me. I'm capable of doing anything that I have to do to win this election. I'm not going to let an entire city suffer through another 4 years under the green political machine, merely because I'm reluctant to hurt one woman or one child.
In other words, you're just as unscrupulous in your small way as the green political machine is in its way.
Mrs. Blodgett, if you're in politics, it's not considered wise to make remarks like that about your boss, Mayor Green.
Oh, Mr. Blodgett, I think you have a right to know this. Sit down, won't you? Please. Now, regardless of what you think, or what you've heard, or what you've read in the news, I am not working hand in glove with Mayor Green. I want to see him beaten.
Good, then. If you want to see him beaten, you'll realize how important it is that I get your name off the ballot. Any way that I can. That's the only way we can beat him.
You mean if my name is taken off the ballot,
Exactly. And if you won't take it off voluntarily, I'll have to go into court.
You know, I don't think it's going to do you any good. Because I don't think that any court will refuse me the right to seek office, if I choose.
Good night, Mrs. Blodgett. Oh, may I make one little suggestion?
Certainly.
I think you'd better have a talk with your two little friends, Morton and Fenwick. Tell them I know about the $2,000 they gave you. Ask them if they want to go into court as co-defendants, charged with fraud and collusion, or would they rather have your name withdrawn?
No, I don't think so.
Well, but if I were in court and under oath, wouldn't I have to admit you gave me the $2,000? Well, otherwise it would be perjury. Or wouldn't it?
Yeah, well,
Huh?
that's right. I tell you what. Why don't you just withdraw your name? You can keep the $2,000 anyhow. I think we've got to line on something else where we probably won't need you anyhow.
You mean you're afraid to go into court?
No, understand this, Mrs. Blodgett. There was nothing illegal about what we did. Perfectly legal.
Oh.
Just that sometimes you go into court and things are made to look different than they really are.
Politics is a big business, Mrs. Blodgett. State politics, national politics, that's what counts. When you come down to a little campaign like this one for mayor, well, it's just about like a little peanut stand on the front lawn. Oh, you don't mind picking up a few nickels, but you can't jeopardize the whole factory just to protect the job of one little guy who runs a peanut stand.
Well, that's Mayor Green you're talking about. He holds the welfare of this whole city right in his hands, and you call him the proprietor of a peanut stand?
Just a figure of speech, that's all.
All right, gentlemen. I'll give you a speech to figure. I am not withdrawing my name. I am not pulling out of the race. People are going to wake up to the fact that this state is being run by a great, big political machine. And do you know why they're going to wake up, Mr. Morton? Because there's going to be a new proprietor in that peanut stand just tooting a whistle for all it's worth. Good day, gentlemen. Yes, but it's not really about Mommy. It's about a man named Perry Blodget.
But it says your name.
Well, I know it says my name, but you see... I'll read it to you again. Now, listen. The red-hot race for mayor erupted in court yesterday with Perry Blodget charging fraud and collusion in connection with the last-minute filing of Mrs. Penny Blodget.
That's you.
That's right. Political unknown. In a prepared statement released to the press, Blodgett pointed out that his charges are leveled against Mayor Green and two of his associates, James L. Morton and Ivan C. Fenwick, and not against Mrs. Blodgett.
That's you.
Well, anyway, it just goes on and on like that, you
They
see.
sure use a lot of big words.
I sure do.
But you're still going to be mayor, aren't you?
Tommy, you know how I'm always telling you to think things out before you do them, because sometimes it isn't enough to say you're sorry? Well, I'm afraid I forgot that myself. I think maybe I've done something foolish just because it seemed like a good idea at the time. Now for this last picture. This is from the Westlake Playground. I had to look it up on the park maps to be sure what it was. You'd find it listed there under Children's Wading Pond, built at the cost of $43,000 to the taxpayers. That's the wading pond. It's infested with flies, swarming with mosquitoes, and heaven only knows what else. Now, I'd like you to know that I don't believe in slogans. I think there have been too many used in this campaign. Balance the budget with Blodgett. Keep out of the red with green. But if I were to give you a slogan, it wouldn't be original. I'd borrow it from wise old Socrates, and here it is. What mean ye, fellow citizens, that ye turn every stone to scrape wealth together, and take so little care of your children, to whom ye must one day relinquish all?
Hi, Mom.
Oh, hi, honey. You know,
Did you know Uncle Perry used to fly an airplane?
I hope you'll pardon the intrusion. I wanted to see you. Tommy invited me in.
Oh, yes, of course. Tommy, I think Uncle Perry and I have some things to discuss privately.
I got you, Mom.
Yeah.
See you later, huh, pal?
Okay.
About this Uncle Perry routine. He felt a little odd to call me Mr. Blodgett.
Well, yes, I can understand that. Well, what was it you came to speak to me about?
I just returned from the courthouse. They've denied the injunction.
That means my name stays on the ballot?
You've got to go down and ask them to remove your name. There's still plenty of time for you to withdraw voluntarily.
Now, why would I do that?
Mrs. Blodgett, you've got to do it. There's no other way. With both our names on the ballot, we'll split the opposition vote between us. Green will have the election in the bag.
Do you know, I think you're wrong. I've been a lot of places and I've talked to a lot of people. They're fed up. I don't think Mayor Green has a chance.
Look, I'll prove it to you with simple mathematics. People will shout and holler and pat you on the back. But only about 40% of them will turn out to the polls, if that. Mayor Green will get his backers out 100% because it means their jobs.
Is it so terribly important to you to be elected mayor?
That's not easy to answer. It's not that I want to be mayor. It's not a personal ambition. I never wanted to run for mayor in the first place. I wanted to wait and run for governor a couple of years from now. That was the one thing in the world I really wanted.
You can still do it.
Suppose I lose to Green. What with your name on the ballot to confuse the voters? Well, I wouldn't stand a chance of being nominated for governor. They're not going to nominate a man for governor who can't be elected mayor.
Well, maybe you should have thought of that before you filed for office.
I did think about it. But I was willing to give up everything I ever wanted, just to break Green's stronghold on this city. To you, the important thing is parks and playgrounds. To others, it's getting rid of graft in the police department or improving neglected streets. And to me, it's more than any of those, or all of those put together. It's what you call integrity in office. It's a matter of keeping faith with the men who lived and died to give us what we call the American way of life.
May I tell you something?
What?
You could be elected mayor or governor or anything you wanted to if you talked to the people the way you talked to me just now.
Well, it wasn't exactly a campaign speech.
Oh, for heaven's sake, why does a campaign speech have to be something different? Why can't it be just an honest, sincere, straightforward talk?
Like some of the talks you've made?
Well, do you know something else? You could make them 1,000 times better.
They were nice talks. I imagine you felt pretty good when they were over.
Indeed, I did.
Unfortunately, that isn't the way you win an election.
Oh, what, I suppose you do win them by those silly slogans, huh? Balance the budget with Blodgett, I guess. By the way, was that your idea?
No, it wasn't my idea. It came from a man who knows a lot more about politics than I do.
And who's that?
Look, Mrs. Blodgett.
Yes?
I'm a Johnny-come-lately to politics. But I've got a business manager or a campaign manager who knows more about politics than anybody in the business. He's been in politics all his life. He knows how these things have to be done.
Uh-huh. You mean like, tell the voters that you favor virtue and oppose sin. Oh, Mr. Blodgett.
Oh.
Never have so few words said so much and meant so little.
All right, so it's corny.
Well, of course it's corny.
But he was right when he said that if you're If you're too proud to peddle corn,
Yes?
you shouldn't be in politics.
And you still think he's the best campaign manager in the business?
Yes.
Mr. Blodgett, why don't you stand on your own feet? Think for yourself. Speak for yourself. Tell the people the truth. Oh, believe me, they'd appreciate it if you treat them like intelligent adults.
You know, you're a very wonderful woman. I realized that the first time I met you. But you just don't know anything about politics. You see, politics is a matter of cold logic. It's mathematical calculation. Women aren't capable of that kind of logic. You want to play the game, but you don't even bother to read the rules. Why, you've done everything wrong. Everything that could be done wrong.
I have?
Yes, you have. For instance, you tell the voters that you're going to raise taxes if necessary to get your playground program into operation. Why, that's ridiculous. That's political suicide.
But it's the truth. Where would I get the money if it didn't come from taxes?
Right there is the reason that I got myself a campaign manager who knows politics. That's the first thing I did when I decided to file.
I think it was a bad hunch.
It wasn't a hunch. It was cold logic.
All right, Mr. Blodgett. I'll give you some logic I think you'll understand. I'll withdraw my name from the ballot. If you promise to get rid of that so-called corn and tell the people the truth.
Oh, that's ridiculous. My campaign manager wouldn't stand for it.
Then get rid of him.
What? Get rid of him?
Certainly.
What do you mean? Now, wait a minute. Do you mean that that's the only condition under which you would withdraw?
That's what I mean.
Oh, brother. And those are the things I want you to remember when you go to the polls tomorrow. And now, with what time we have left, I'd like to answer a few questions that you phoned in while we were on the air. The first is from Mr. Albert J. Robbins, 3121 18th Street. He wants to know, what will happen to our property here on 18th Street if you go ahead with plans for flood control that you mentioned last Tuesday? How would you like a big drainage ditch running through your yard? Now, I suggest that Mr. Robbins be a little patient. After all, we don't know where the ditches are going to be until after the engineers have made their... Folks, let's be frank. Honestly, I wouldn't like a drainage ditch running through my backyard at all. But if it had to be there, and if it were necessary for the good of the city, I'd expect to be paid a fair price for it. That's all I can promise you. We are going to move forward. We are going to whip our flood problem.
And so I'm asking my supporters to vote for Perry Blodget, because I'm sure that he is far better qualified than I to handle the complicated affairs of a city of this size.
I'm not a dragon slayer, and I can't promise you any miracles. But I do know this, that all of us working together can bring back a good, decent, honest government to our city.
Perry Blodget has told you honestly, simply, and unmistakably where he stands and what he stands for. Now, may I remind you once again that if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And please, I beg of you, don't fall for a political machine that does not and cannot serve you, the American people.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mayor Blodgett.
Hi, Miss Blodgett.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Merv. See you later.
Oh, what a celebration.
Hey, wasn't it?
Imagine what it's going to be like when you're elected governor, huh?
You know what I was thinking?
What?
The first thing I'm going to do when I get into office is launch a program of economy and efficiency.
Looks like a very good idea.
And I was thinking, too, that if you married me, you could still use your monogram stuff. You'd still be Penny Blodgett.
Oh, on your honor, Your Honor?
On my honor.
Well, now, what could be more efficient than that? In giving advice to a young diplomat, Sir Henry Wotton, the English statesman, once said, "Tell the truth, and you will therefore puzzle and confound your adversaries." Well, good night. See you next week.